Alright, what's going on guys? George here, and today we're going to go ahead and start working on the 240SX. We're going to be going ahead and sticking a VQ35 out of a G35 into the car. The car used to have a boosted K in it. That one spun a rod bearing, so now we're on to the VQ. You can see the older videos of us preparing the car for the actual installation of the VQ. So now we just have all the parts. We're going to go ahead and just try and put everything together real quick. So the VQ's trans, the CD009 I believe, this is actually an earlier one. Out of an 03 G35, I think it has a different CD series transmission, but like the bell housing is a little bigger than the KA one, so we're going to go ahead and smash out the transmission tunnel so we can fit everything in. So we have this nice hammer here, and we're just going to hit it a bunch until it looks bigger. Does that seem good?
How much of it moved?
So now we're going to go ahead and install the Hexa Garage motor mounts on the VQ. Paul's in the process of removing the
do you want to put them on and put the motor
factory pedestals. And then over here, this replaces that. This is the trans crossmember and a bolt. And these are the motor mounts. This is soap. And these have these little rubber isolators here, as well as this hardware to bolt the VQ into the S13. So now we're going to go ahead and remove the shifter from the transmission so we can more easily fit the transmission into the car as we test fit it to see if we smash out the transmission tunnel enough. So we're going to go ahead and remove this tripod piece here, some bolts down there, some bolts up there, and then we'll go ahead and install our new shifter when it's in the car for the final assembly. And for that we have a GK Tech CD009 whatever shifter. So it has like this bracket here and then the shifter and then some hardware. And then this moves the location of the shifter back towards the factory hole in an S13, because if you don't get one of these shifter relocations, the shifter ends up popping out like, instead of like here where the hole is, it's like over here. You have to like cut it out, it's kind of in an awkward place. So this kind of relocates it to where it's supposed to be, so pretty good. What I come along is for. Oh my God.
So I have to talk to him about me.
Nice. You're probably tired this time.
You can watch the car bend.
Oh, put the regular jack underneath.
Transmission jack.
Oh yeah.
I just sometimes I wonder what's holding it up. Best to not think about it.
Power steering lines? Yeah.
Really?
This hard line right here? Yep. What are we trying to do? Get it to sit where it should sit?
Yeah.
Do you have a bolt so we can stick it through?
But it's not even close. You can visually see.
No, I know.
But the bolt and the like little.
Oh wow, I just got very
somewhere
light
over there.
Do you think it's a generator or do you think it's tires?
You go down while I shut.
I'm gonna take it out and pretend I haven't put it in yet, and then fix all the things that are wrong.
And then put it back in.
And be like, wow, it went in first try.
So I just pulled the motor out of the car again just to like measure some stuff up. So I'm gonna go do some shopping right now. I'm gonna get a hose to loop the coolant lines as well as some other hoses. Also, I'm gonna go get a piece of 2x2 square tubing. I'm also gonna pick up some other random odds and ends. I am gonna go ahead and return a couple of things that I don't need and get some stuff done. So I ended up grabbing the hose for the loop, some automatic transmission fluid, which is the power steering fluid, some hose clamps, some caps to cap the thing off that we need to cap off. So a factory 240, obviously it's from the 90s, it has a cable driven throttle for the KA, and that's what you use for an SR as well, but our VQ35 out of a G35 has drive-by-wire, and that of course means the gas pedal has a little sensor in it for the drive-by-wire. And we're going to be retaining the drive-by-wire of the car and the factory throttle body. So we're going to go ahead and install the gas pedal from the G35 into the S13. I talked to the guys at Hexa Garage and they said in order to line the gas pedal up properly, I'm going to have to space it out about 2 inches. So I'm going to get some 2x2 tubing, cut it about 2 inches, stick that behind where I bolted the gas pedal, get some longer screws, and then we should be all set for the right amount of travel for the drive-by-wire. And they didn't have 2x2 square tubing at Lowe's, so I just got this 1x1, and I'm just going to cut it, 2 of them at 2 inches, and I'm going to put one of them, or one section over each bolt, so there will be like a flat surface for the back of the pedal to mate with the mounting surface, and yeah, we should be pretty good with that. So we went ahead and looped our heater lines that would go to the heater core. One on this side goes around the back of the motor, up and over to this side where it is hose clamped off. So I just measured how long the drive shaft's gonna be, and that was from the surface where the transmission meets the drive shaft to the surface where the input shaft on the differential is, measures 49 5/8 inches. So if anyone's wondering, that's what mine was. Your car might be bent a little bit differently than mine, so it might be a little bit different, but as long as it's in the general vicinity, it should be fine because there's a little bit of play on how the drive shaft actually goes into the transmission. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and load this stuff up in the car and we're going to head over to the drive shaft shop. So you can see here on the left we have the G35 drive shaft, and on the right we have the 240 drive shaft that was for the KA. So pretty much what's going to happen is I'm going to turn both of these into one-piece drive shaft. It's obviously going to use the front section from the G35 one, and then that will couple to this part of the 240 drive shaft. And then in theory we should have a one-piece drive shaft that fits the VQ S13, and it should be a lot cheaper than going the route of buying one that's pre-made, so we'll see how it goes. So we got the drive shafts in the back bundled up in this moving blanket so it doesn't get as much grease onto the vehicle, and we are now on the way. So we just dropped off the drive shaft parts and we're gonna go ahead and get our new drive shaft made. So now we're going back to work on the S13. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and clear into the hood so it will fit over this intake manifold. Just want to make sure everything is all set. If we have to cut out any of the interior supports of the hood, I want to get that done now. Kind of distract me from doing more like difficult things. This will be something easy. Just get the angle grinder out, cut some stuff up. So we're going to go ahead and start that right now. So we're having some clearance problems right here. You can see there's a little bit of red paint on the intake manifold and like where the throttle body is. So I'm going to go ahead and just start by taking a little chunk out right here. Because ideally I'd like to leave a little bit of support in the hood so it doesn't just like rattle around a lot. Because of my old hood, all of the supports were ripped off and like all the tack welds were pulled off. And if you drove on the highway, the entire hood just shook violently. So I'd like to try to avoid that if we can. So as you can see here, I went ahead and cut this piece of support out here, and it kind of pretty much lines up with the intake manifold. Go ahead and pull this off and try and shut the hood again. Something's hitting. Well, it's this. Oh, easy game. Wonder if the hood is actually contacting anything. Hood is shut. Or I can just wait until we drive to see if it actually rattles or anything. I was kind of concerned because the intake manifold looked like it was sitting a bit high. But I mean, the hood is closed, so that's pretty good. So now that we got the hood all taken care of, we're going to go ahead and take it off and work on the power steering stuff. So I'm trying to do this swap for the smallest amount of money I possibly can. And in doing that, I'm going to try to use the G35's power steering lines, which it would be easier if I just got like AN lines or pre-made lines, because I could just easily put them from the rack up to the power steering pump. But unfortunately, I can't do that because I already have these hard lines that I got with the car. So I'm going to try and figure out how to get these into the car. I was talking to the guys at Hexa Garage, and I said it's not too hard. You just have to bend them a little bit and you can pretty much get them to fit, because the power steering pump's in the same location as it is in the G35, obviously. It's the motor from it. And then the steering rack, where it bolts up and the fluid actually goes through, it's almost in the same spot. It just kind of is oriented a little bit differently. So the lines are the right length. It's just a matter of getting them to line up right. So I'm going to go ahead and unbolt these things so I can have the two lines separate so I can figure them each out on their own. So I got this tubing bender from Pep Boys. It's like $15, and that allowed me to make a 90-degree bend over here on this power steering line, and then like where did I do it? Like, I don't even know. This is like a very slight bend here. But with that, it was enough to get this line screwed into the rack over here, and it goes up to the power steering pump. And there's gonna be a ton of room around here, just because this engine's so short. The radiator's gonna go up to like here, so there's gonna be plenty of room for this line to run. Just the radiator is gonna go across, and this line will be here. If I have to bend it a little bit more to get it more out of the way, I can do that. But I'm gonna try and bend it the least I possibly can, unless I really have to, because the more I use the bender, the weaker the metal's gonna get, and the more likely I am to have to unbend something that's really not gonna be so good. So we're gonna leave it like this for now, and now we're gonna go ahead and start with what I believe to be the return line from the rack. So I also pretty much think I finished up the power steering. It doesn't look that pretty, but I think it will work. Got both of the lines off the G35 going into the S13 rack. They come around for some awkward bends that I don't really want to get rid of because I think I might kink it. I don't know if I can undo them. And I think there's going to be space here, so it's like, what else is going to take up the space? I guess the power steering lines can do it. Radiator will be here, and like they're soft, so like they do whatever they need to do. Then it comes over here. And I just got everything zip tied where I think I want it. I think I'm gonna put the power steering reservoir here. It's still above the pump, which I think needs to be like that just because it seems like it wants to drain. So that should be good. Then I have to extend this to over here to meet that. That's pretty much the only thing. Then I've got this line coming off here going to the power steering cooler off the G35, which is up here, just zip tied in place for now, just for fitting. Then these lines, obviously the one that comes off of that goes into the reservoir, and then yeah, it's like this one, it's not like tight or anything, but I've got the banjo bolt on there, and I mean that's pretty much all set besides the fact that this needs to be bridged right here. And I did all of this with just the stuff that was on the G35 power steering lines. Like I just cut some of the hoses, moved them around a little bit, but should be all set. That was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I thought it would be a really difficult thing to do, but I'm super glad it was so easy to do. It's just like making this so like this entire process is like so simple. Like there's no way that Nissan didn't think people would put VQs in the S chassis. Like the power steer or the oil pan just perfectly clears the sway bar, and the subframe just perfectly clears the oil pan, and just like everything just fits so nicely. And it's like, thank you Nissan for doing this for me. It makes it so easy. So now I'm gonna go ahead and try and figure out all of the radiator stuff. This should be super easy. I'm just going to go ahead and use the S13 radiator because it actually fits in the car. It'd be cool if I could use the one off the G35 because it like has the hoses in the right spot, but it doesn't fit in between the frame rails at all, so not really an option. Leaking coolant everywhere. Leaking a lot of coolant. So for the upper radiator hose, we have a KA S13 one, and it literally fits perfectly. You can see right here, this is where it comes out. It has this perfect kink in it, and it just like wants to line up so perfectly with this entry point on the radiator right here. So we're just gonna go ahead, chop it right here, and that one's gonna be completely done, super easy. So we have the upper radiator hose completely done, super easy. Now we're gonna go ahead and figure out the lower radiator hose, which is gonna be a little bit more work. So way back when, this 240 had a single cam KA in it, and on the lower radiator hose of that setup, there was this little like housing for like a coolant temp sensor. And it looks like it was OEM. It wasn't hooked up to anything when I got the car. But what it would work really well for is to bridge this gap I've created by getting the KA radiator to work with the VQ. Is that I've used part of the KA radiator hose and part of the VQ radiator hose. But what that leaves me with is the fact that I have these two hoses right next to each other that need to connect. And what would make a great connecting point would be a piece of aluminum piping. What would also make a great connection point is this little housing right here, because it's pretty much the same thing. If I leave this little sensor in it, it's just going to act as a like flow-through piece, because it doesn't really protrude into anything. So I'm going to go ahead and just like pull the hoses off and see what it looks like to see if it would be good for that. So I got the piece out, took the wire wheel to it a little bit, cleaned it up a tiny amount. Now I'm just going to go ahead and cut these wires off of it, because this connector is going to be completely useless to me. And then I'm going to go ahead and pop it in the car, see if it looks like it'll be good, and if so, we should be done with the radiator setup. So here's the final product of the lower coolant hose that we had to set up. So I ended up just throwing in a radiator fan shroud as well as the fans. I just picked up the ISR Performance Kit. It was pretty easy. I went ahead and just wired it up. It's pretty simple. Wasn't too involved. As you can see here, I got the fans run. I've got to two connectors right there, so if I need to remove them, I can. It's not like hardwired to the car. Then over here I've got a relay, which is, I'm very proud of myself, and I got a fuse, which is like super legit. So yeah, heat shrunk, soldered, crimp connectors. It's got power going to it as well. And I was thinking about doing a switch. I decided to just wire it to the ignition because there's no real point in having it on a switch except that I'm going to forget about it. So ignition on. Fans are going. Because when I had the K in the car, it had a clutch fan, and that always spun when the engine was on. So it's like, the engine will be able to warm up just fine. The thermostat can just not open. That won't run through the radiator. Will warm up. If I ever have an issue where the engine's too cold, I guess I can wire it to a switch, but I don't think that's going to be an issue that I'm going to have. Or I could wire it to a thermostat if I really wanted to, but that would be a lot of work. So I think this should be all set. If there are any issues, I can always address those later on. It was pretty simple. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to trying to figure out the headers. So when I got the G35, it had these DC Sports header on it, which I thought was pretty cool. I was like, oh, it has an aftermarket header. That'll be pretty good for performance. Nice tubular design. As it turns out, those protrude really far from the block, and it would make contact with the steering shaft as well as the rest of the car. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to run those, so I just went ahead and picked up a set of these stock 350Z headers. These hug the block a lot tighter, so that's actually going to work really well. Luckily, these were super cheap and super local, so I just ended up picking them up. So what I have to do is just hit these with a hammer a little bit to make them clear the steering shaft. I'm going to go ahead and remove the steering shaft, shove these inside the area right here on this side, and then I'll see where the steering shaft makes contact. Go ahead and hit it with a little hammer, clearance it, and then we should be all set to have the headers in. So as you can see here, we have the header in. I did a little bit of clearancing back here. Might have to do a little bit more. Kind of see where the flange is pretty close to the chassis. And then this is the slight issue, is where the steering column's going to kind of make or the steering shaft right here is kind of going to make contact with the header. Like, it'll spin by it, but it just slightly bumps into it. So I'm going to go ahead and mark where it is, pull the header off, pull the steering shaft off so I can get the header off, and then hit it with a hammer a little bit, and it should clear. And we should be all set with the driver's side header, and the passenger one should just be bolt in, maybe clearance it a little bit next to the firewall, but aside from that, we should be all set. So right here is where the steering shaft is rubbing the header, so I'm going to go ahead and just take this hammer to it. Could use a ball peen hammer, which would give it a nice spherical shape in the dents, but instead I'm just going to use this non-ball peen hammer. Probably just mangle this entire piece because I don't have a ball peen hammer. So now that we've modified the header, we're going to go ahead and throw it back in the car, and we should be all set. So I removed the O2 sensors from these catalytic converters, and I'm going to replace them with these test plates. Went ahead and moved the O2 sensors into them, as well as wrapping them with some heat wrap, just because they're a little bit close to my feet, and then the other one's a little bit close to some other lines, like fuel lines, brake lines, to kind of move them out of the way a little bit. I also went ahead and wrapped part of this header as well, but this should just try and keep the temperature over there down. Shouldn't actually be an issue, just want to try and be safe. Not have things melting and catching fire would be ideal. So now I'm going to try and go ahead and pop these into the car. So to get the headers and test pipes to fit in perfectly, I went ahead and cut the passenger side test pipe and then welded it at like a little tiny pie cut. That was enough to just move it over so it didn't make contact with the frame anymore. Went ahead and bent the fuel lines and brake lines out of the way because they kind of were in a weird place. Kind of rerouted them around the header so they're not going to be in such a heat centralized area. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the header from the engine so I can go ahead and slide a gasket in, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the driver's side. So this is the driver's side test pipe right here. It's obviously wrapped. I went ahead and just cut it and welded it, a little pie cut here, because it was also too close to the frame rail, and I kind of just wanted to make sure it was clear. So I went ahead and did this super easy. Now I'm going to go ahead and bolt this one in as well. So now we're going to go ahead and finish up the installation of the shifter, as it's going to be a little bit easier to finish installing once the transmission's in the car, so we don't have to maneuver everything in through the engine bay. See the bottom part of the shifter installed, we put it in before we even put the motor and trans into the car, but this is the second part of the GK Tech shifter, and this has to go in from the top. So now we're going to go ahead and bolt this thing in. It's super easy to do, and it pretty much solves all the issues of putting the Z transmissions into the 240 where the shifter just sits too far back. This way it's going to be nice and forward, so it's going to kind of be in the original shifter hole. You won't have any issues with the location of the shifter. So we've made a ton of progress on the VQS13. We're pretty much all set. All we're waiting for is the engine harness to come in. We're going to finish wiring up the fuel pump, put the drive shaft in, and then aside from that, that should really be it. Most of the big stuff is done. Engines and radiators in, power steering is done. Everything big like that's done. Exhaust is pretty much all set except for the fact that it doesn't go all the way to the back of the car. But it's fine for just turning the car on and driving around a bit. We might have some other odds and ends to take care of, like some vacuum lines, that sort of stuff. But really, we've made a lot of progress, and the swap's been super easy so far. So if you guys have enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned, because in the next video, this car will turn on and it will drive down the road. I promise you that. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.